Hello everybody, my name is Andrew and this is a little bit of an update video on my old truck project. So right here we're just doing a little bit of touch up on some of the rough spots on the frame. We've got a lot of it just brought down to the minimum height of the rust just so that this specific paint that I'm going to be using bonds and adheres well. Of course you don't want a lot of loose debris. That's why I'm grabbing the shop vac out and taking care of business here. So just making it a little bit more even, taking it down some of the high spots so there's not a lot of inconsistencies with how tall the frame is. And this differs a little bit in the way of painting how you would for a final coat for, say, body panels and things of that nature. This specific paint doesn't necessarily have to have a nice even finish. You know, you're not looking at how it reflects in the light, if there's high spots, low spots, if there's any type of orange peel, anything like that. This product that I'm going to be putting on here specifically bonds to the rust and makes it a paintable surface. Here I am whipping it out now. Rattle can. I've used two separate products in here. I believe this one is a duplicolor, and I also had another brand that they both seem to work pretty well interchangeably. One of them just had a little bit better flow out of the can, so I usually do my touch-up coats with that on spots that need a little extra attention. But I just did a little bit of final touching with a spot I wasn't super happy with that I hadn't dealt with beforehand. And of course, as you can see, coverage is basically the name of the game. You know, you're still doing some thin coats, but you don't necessarily have to make sure that they're even. You just want to make sure that all of the rusted surface is covered so that the paint can cure and bond to it. And so the big plan for the frame is going to be bed lining it. In the front, I did a little bit of experiments with a little Herculiner and actually brushed it on, and then I also used the roller that came with this kit that I had bought, and that worked okay. But I think I'm going to have nice smooth thin results with a rattle can, like what you're going to see in the future section of this video when we actually move on to doing the underside of the cab. So that's the first coat. Of course, it's not perfect. There's still little spots, especially underneath that shackle there. There was a little bit left that I touched up a little bit later on. And, you know, this is my first time really recording any work that I've done, and I can't exactly say that, like that big spot right there that I missed. Oh, gosh. I can't say that this is the exact way that I would recommend everybody do it. This is just my way of doing it, and this is me putting on the second coat. Of course, you know, not having all of my brain cells available at that current moment, didn't get it on there. So about a week later, this was on a Sunday, my dad and I are in the garage. He's got to work that night, and we're just taking care of reorganizing, we'll say. And so we've got some stuff to move. And what do we have? Oh, look at the cab. Cab just randomly is appearing there. So yeah, we're just moving things, trying to make sure that when we move this tool cabinet, nothing falls off on it, and just making sure that when we have our workspace there, we're actually being responsible when we're flipping this cab, because we're basically going to put it on the back. We're just going to let it go right onto there. So I'm thinking, you know, let's just flip it over, throw it on some dollies. It'll be no big deal. Should work just fine. But, of course, my dad, being wiser and having way better ideas than I usually have, says, you know what, we need to increase the surface. And, you know, that was a good idea. It made the transition a lot easier, especially when we started getting everything cleaned up. It made it so much easier. But, of course, teamwork makes the dream work, and I'm handing boards over. He's laying them out nice and perfect, and, of course, has the foresight to use a moving blanket, you know. Like I said, he's got some experience on me. So, of course, we start to move it down a little bit earlier. We had to adjust some other things in the garage to move that shelf back a little bit. Of course, I was prepared. I grabbed a lot of things, and apparently all you need is some of these braided discs, these really thick braided discs for some of this stuff. So as you can see, those discolored spots, there's some undercoating sitting on there that has been degraded. I mean, this truck's over 70 years old. So, of course, it's seen Wisconsin winters, and this was originally a farm truck. And so it's definitely had its use and has helped quite a bit on the farm. And, you know, it's also been a high schooler's truck and it's seen some interesting things during its life. And I'm hoping that with all this work I'm putting into it, we'll be able to bring her back to something crazy and new. Of course, my plans aren't necessarily to make a perfect restoration. I've pretty much decided that I don't want it to have fenders, and I'm going to use highboy lights instead of the ones that came on originally inside the fenders. And finding the grill teeth are near impossible for any reasonable amount of money, and I can't seem to find anywhere that reproduces them. So I basically gave up on that part of my dream. So my goal now, I think, is that I'm going to bring it down to bare steel for the majority of the cab and treat the rust and then go over it with a nice clear coat, which I will definitely make sure I have nice even layers, because I know some people were looking at my paint job and saying, oh, that's not really that good. And there's my dad trying out the Ryobi. You know, he's a diehard DeWalt guy and craftsman and all that, but for me, I wandered into Home Depot one day after picking something up out on the app, and I was like, oh, this comes with a bag of tools and a couple batteries, and I can actually afford it, so let's sign me up on that. So been a big Ryobi fan ever since. So he's doing some touch-up on everything, of course, adjusting the camera, and you know, I had it set up from the back, and you couldn't really see anything, and he made a great directorial call moving this over so you can actually see a little bit of the progression. And of course, you got to keep things a little bit cleaner. As you can tell, we're wearing dust masks to block all the rust particulate. We have safety glasses on, which I highly recommend, especially when you're using abrasives. And, you know, even though you might not think about it when you're doing things, it just feels like, oh, I'm just getting in my own way. There have been people that have lost a lot of their eyesight, you know, or gone permanently blind due to these injuries, you know, and also it's just kind of irritating and ruins your day when you just get a bunch of rust in your eye and it gets stuck in there, and you know, you're just pushing it further in and in. So here we are, just going through. Oh, I love it when I was just cleaning out those grooves and they just turned a bright rust orange instead of that darker color. And my dad, he's good with electronics as far as actually hooking things up to power. A lot better than I am. That was the one module in my automotive course that I didn't really do that well on. Funny enough, you know, working on uninterruptible power systems part-time for a buddy's dad, I still can't figure out the sparky bits that well. So he's going in and pulling cabling and taking different accessories off so that we have a clean shell to actually do some body work. And he's putting together a new wiring harness and actually using a fuse box, converting everything over from 6-volt positive to a 12-volt negative. And so I'm just, you know, tooling away, looking at it, waiting for the dust to clear a little bit before I see what's there. And he's not happy with my mask. He thinks that it was wimpy, and so I put this other one on that I've had when I was cleaning out the interior, because who knows what they put all this stuff together with. I think they use like tar and asbestos. So, you know, that's the other thing when you're wearing the face mask and the eye protection, you really take away a lot of those risks that you would be facing. You know, you don't want to have to call one of those lawyers from mesothelioma.
And as I take the bolts off, let it bring it down.
And here we're taking out the heater core.
Okay.
Of course, directorial genius here. Going to shove this camera in here haphazardly and hope it took a good shot, which it did. I think this is actually a pretty good angle.
Ready?
I'm pretty proud of it.
My like there's a whole lot holding this thing on.
Here she comes.
Got her?
And she So that wasn't as heavy as I expected it to be, and I'm happy it came out well. A little editing teleportation magic there.
Look at that bolt and nut organization skill right here.
Put the nuts back where they belong. That way you don't lose your nuts.
Yeah, you don't want to go nuts, huh?
And nuts. Back up on the Jeep.
Alright, and back to it. Now that we got that all out of the way, you know, just plop my butt back right into the seat and get into it. And of course, got to keep things clean, you know. My mom and dad were nice enough to let me store this hunk of metal in their garage for way too long. I think I've had this truck about 8 years, and you know, with all the misadventures I had and just things getting in the way, it was nice to actually have some time when the weather is fair, and my dad being around to help me work on it. And of course, I've had plenty of friends help me along the way as well, just getting it apart. And so here's what it looks like. So you can tell like there's some discoloration in different areas that aren't the rust color, and a lot of that is where the undercoating was preserved, and so that's actually closer to bare steel than any type of rust being there. So it turned out pretty good. I felt that with my hand, and it's pretty flat. So to be completely honest, the bottom of this truck in the broad daylight, it had a lot less issues with holes and things than I had thought. Of course, here's the interior view, and that's that like spray on tar stuff I was kind of talking about. And of course the door panels are out, and those are just cheap little cardboard things that you could probably make for yourself, but we just kept them off because it's easier just in case. I was still trying to put lock cylinders in, and my uncle had helped with getting the springs for the door latches, because for whatever reason they used a coil spring, like a clock spring sort of a situation, and he had a lot better ideas on how to fix that than what I had done. So here's the first coat of that rust coat paint, and so it went on. Like I said, coverage is the name of the game. You know, you want to have it bond, and I put on another coat after this and just make sure that it all worked together. So here's the second coat going on. As you can tell, it's getting a little bit darker. It's not going to be super even. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to cover, and it needs to be applied within the same window so that it can all bond together and create more of a layer. And right here I'm going over it with a flashlight to make sure that I don't see a lot of rust and big spots where it's just going to be obvious that I missed. So here we are rolling it back in, and here's where the boards really come into play. Having these dollies on there, you know, they were able to extend the reach of where the dollies run off before dropping this thing on the ground. And so here's that rubberized undercoating. It's kind of weird. It comes out brown tan color, and it's kind of gross looking. And it, you know, even through that mask, you can really smell it, you know. And like I said, these are this is a good mask with good filters on it. They're P100s, and they work great. It's just that, you know, the chemical reactions that are going on in there and the propellant it's not really great for you to breathe in. So something's better than nothing, in my opinion. So just have the mask on and get to work. So, you know, inspect your spots, make sure everything looks good, and you can see the texture on it. And again, you know, it doesn't have to be super even. Of course, you don't want to have huge discrepancy spots where there's just a huge high point, but just get the coverage, make sure it seals and closes. So that's it for now. We're going to be moving along here shortly, hopefully, and do something new next weekend.